How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiega. Today, coming to you live on July 24th. Another round of stories around the NFL. In the first half of the show, we're going to go over some of the stories around training camp and just projecting on what could happen in 2024. First off, the biggest news, Brandon Aiyuk reporting to training camp but not practicing. We're going to talk about that and what their general manager said in John Lynch. Then Saquon Barkley, of course, with all the news coming about of his free agency decision moving to the Philadelphia Eagles. We haven't really heard from Saquon up until this point, until yesterday in an interview with The Athletic. I'm going to get into what he said and just reacting off of that. And in the first half of the show also, we're going to talk about more on the Chicago Bears defense. Their star defensive back, Jaylon Johnson, had some comments to make on the potential of this team and wanting to see results finally in 2024. That'll be the first half, plus some more topics coming on later on. So before I get started, I want to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to make on today's show, to please use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. By using that link you see on your screen, I can see your question pop up. I'll read it out loud, and that way, get your guys' thoughts on anything I say, any of the topics on today's show. It's more interactive this way, and also, it's a big help for the show and the network, so we greatly appreciate it if you guys are able to use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, with any of your questions or comments. With that being said, though, we'll jump in right away to the biggest news so far with training camp officially now underway. All 32 teams have reported to camp. The biggest piece of news, probably going to be the biggest piece of news going on throughout the entire training camp phase of this offseason, has been the 49ers and what they're going to do with Brandon Aiyuk. Very interesting now developing because the 49ers, they reported to camp yesterday. Their entire team did. The veterans joined the rookies yesterday. They actually had their first practice today, and don't you know it, Brandon Aiyuk showed up to training camp. He reported yesterday, surprising everybody, including myself. I did not expect him to join because he has been holding out throughout the entirety of this offseason. You know, he has been absent from OTAs, from minicamp, so I just figured he was going to be out. But all the reports, everybody confirmed that Brandon Aiyuk was there. But with their first practice being today, you could imagine that he was not practicing. He was just on the sidelines. Kyle Shanahan talked about it a little bit, saying that he has a sore back and a sore neck as well, kind of leading you into a way where you'd think that that was the reason why he wasn't practicing, but he acknowledged the fact that he knows what's going on. He knows that this could be a hold-in situation, so they're prepared for it. You know, that is what's going on evidently right now. According to how everything else has been played out, according to NFL Network's Mike Garafolo, he reported last week that the 49ers haven't had any extension talks with Brandon Aiyuk since May, which is pretty ridiculous to think about at all if they haven't even mentioned it or brought it up or brought another offer to the table or something like that to Brandon Aiyuk, but that's why you see him absent from everything else leading up to that point. And on top of that now, we're shifting into a point where this is a hold-in now, like I mentioned, and it is different in a way that I think it's a little bit more awkward, honestly, just knowing that he's there. You see him every day that you're there at training camp. I'm sure that they are all living together at the facility or at somewhere else that they're holding training camp at. So everybody sees him each and every day. It's sort of that constant reminder that Kyle Shanahan, General Manager John Lynch, I'm sure they see him every day as a reminder that, you know, he is there, this great player. You have him sitting right there, but he's not able to practice, or he just doesn't want to practice on top of this contract situation that you guys have going on. So that's where it is right now. Aiyuk surprising a lot of people, reporting to camp. Similarly to CeeDee Lamb, where he's also in a holdout situation, but he is in a holdout situation. He isn't there. He isn't present at camp. And it'll be fascinating to see if one of these guys gets a contract extension over the other. You know, very different approaches to this. CeeDee Lamb deciding not to show up. Brandon Aiyuk there each and every day. So say Brandon Aiyuk gets an extension first. Maybe that make CeeDee Lamb show up to training camp the next day, not practice, but just show up now to kind of incentivize the Dallas Cowboys to get something done. Or similarly, the other way, less likely that Brandon Aiyuk is there and then he just stops showing up, but you never know. You never know. They're in almost the exact same situation, obviously drafted in the same year, so they are very much impacting each other on how these negotiations go. But something I wasn't expecting also to just tag along with this hold-in situation with the 49ers. Their star left tackle, Trent Williams, was also not practicing today. He was there, but Kyle Shanahan also said that he wasn't practicing for contract-related reasons. So that's another thing just added on to the 49ers' plate as if they needed anything else. Two situations for two of their most important players that they're going to have to get done. Who goes first? If Trent Williams gets done first, I think that's another sort of slap in the face for Brandon. Definitely asking for more money, most likely, but Brandon's been going at this for the entire offseason, and we haven't really mentioned Trent Williams at all up until this point in terms of contract-related issues for the 49ers. So if he gets it done first, that pretty much sends a clear message, I would think, to Brandon that this contract might not be as close as a lot of people think, but we'll see. On that topic of Brandon Aiyuk, General Manager John Lynch also had some things to say about it. While speaking to local media yesterday, on Aiyuk, he said, "We've tried diligently to get this done. We haven't been able to get there. What I've learned from my past experiences for the last 7 years, going into our 8th, is that sometimes when you think that there's no way this thing is going to progress, they do." And on that initial opening comment that John Lynch mentioned, he does have a point. Credit to him and the 49ers for how they've done business and almost have come through each and every time because they've been able to do a good job of signing Nick Bosa. He held out, I think, almost the entire offseason, the entire training camp, and they got it done, making him the highest paid edge rusher eventually last year. Then Christian McCaffrey also holding off a little bit, but they got it done this offseason. Kyle Juszczyk as well. They were able to maintain and keep these guys who are all the highest paid at their positions. They've kept all these guys on their team, and just credit to them for doing business, knowing how to negotiate with their guys and getting them to stay on the roster because they've definitely lost some crucial pieces along the way. But for the most part, you'd have to tip your hat to John Lynch and this organization for not only getting it done, but for having the confidence to do it. Clearly, that applies in this situation. But now, John Lynch added to this comment by mentioning more on Brandon Aiyuk on how this is sort of developing, which I found a little bit interesting in how he worded it a little bit here. As you guys can see on your screen, he continued on to say, "We fully intend on Brandon being a Niner moving forward. We're always open to listen to things, but like I said, we expect Brandon to be an integral part of our team, like he has been, and excited about that as well." And on Monday, George Kittle also chimed in talking about it. Of course, they're going to ask his teammates about where they see the situation going. He showed his support again for Brandon, saying that he hopes that Brandon gets the money that he deserves eventually from the 49ers. And going back to what John Lynch said on top of George Kittle, again, just chiming in, believing that Brandon deserves the money that he's probably asking for. He has earned it up until this point. It is interesting, a little bit of contradicting words there from John Lynch, just based on the reports that we've heard, because up until this point now, since Brandon Aiyuk has requested a trade officially, everything has pointed to the fact that the 49ers aren't interested in trading at all. But with what John Lynch said, he said that at least that they're willing to listen to some things if somebody comes with the appropriate and required asking price that the 49ers are asking for from any team wanting to trade for Brandon Aiyuk. So again, it seems like they haven't completely shut out that route of going with Brandon Aiyuk if worst comes to worst, but I'm sure the first option obviously is to try and get it done. Prior experiences of them getting these massive deals done gives you a little bit more confidence if you're a Niners fan or something like that, that this could eventually be something to have worked out, but everyone's going to keep a close eye on it. Brandon Aiyuk now at training camp. Will he eventually practice with Kyle Shanahan mentioning that he has some soreness to deal with, or will he actually just continue to hold in? And what does John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan do about this now that they are constantly seeing him each and every day? But that's really where it's at right now. I mentioned that awkwardness of having Brandon there on the sidelines. It'll be interesting to see over the next few days if they interview him, ask him some questions about it, and how much he's willing to disclose at that point, because again, it's really uncomfortable, honestly, if he has no filter or doesn't hold back while being at the 49ers facility. So that'll be something else to keep an eye on. But really the overarching idea of this entire thing is that Brandon decided to show up. I'm sure people advised him to show up and felt that this was the best method of getting the eventual contract that he believes he is worth. But we'll see how it plays out. Keep an eye also on CeeDee Lamb, like I mentioned, whether his different strategy gets him closer or gets him to his contract extension before that of Brandon Aiyuk. Everything there left on the cards for now. Also, Trent Williams, as a reminder too, not practicing. We'll see how long that goes on, but weird things going on with the 49ers. A little bit of things we'd expected, and then just things that blindsided me, honestly, with Brandon showing up and Trent Williams not practicing. So we're only in the first week. We're only in the first week of this thing. I think it's only going to get a lot better. But that'll be that on the 49ers. That'll be that on John Lynch and Brandon Aiyuk. We're going to go to a quick break for right now, but when we return, more on Saquon Barkley and this development with him joining the Philadelphia Eagles. We've heard everything from the Giants side of things from Joe Schoen on Hard Knocks. Now we've got an opportunity to listen to what Saquon Barkley had to say, what he was feeling during this time, and how he reacted to watching some of the clips on Hard Knocks on how everything went down. That is coming up right after this break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now to jump into our second topic. We've heard all along this period of the offseason where Hard Knocks offseason has just focused in on the Giants, and a major part of that has been how in the heck did they let Saquon Barkley walk out their door, their best player, the most popular player. How did this manage to get to an area now where he joins one of your biggest rivals in the Philadelphia Eagles? We've heard as much as we can from Hard Knocks, diving into the conversations between Joe Schoen and his agent, between John Mara and Joe Schoen, and everything that, led up until this point where Saquon decided to move on. But there are two sides to the story, obviously. We've heard everything from the Giants, but we haven't heard anything yet from Saquon other than his comments that he's made during press conferences or anything like that. Now he fully sat down yesterday with The Athletic. They released their interview that they had with Saquon on the Scoop City podcast. They had a full conversation with Saquon about his side of things, how he saw it, what he was feeling while everything was going on. And I thought he had a lot of interesting comments to make and some pretty just brutally honest things to say about how everything went down. So right away, the biggest thing you saw, I think, on the trailer, on the little teaser that you got before this interview was released yesterday, was the biggest quote where Saquon said, "I kind of felt like it was kind of a little disrespectful, to be honest, because it's kind of like a slap in the face," talking about the Giants telling him to test the market in that conversation that you saw on Hard Knocks between Joe Schoen and Saquon Barkley. But after that Hard Knocks clip of Joe Schoen telling him that it probably will be better for him to hit the market, get a feel for what his value is, for what his market price is in this year's free agent market. After that, Saquon told Diana Rossini, who he was doing the interview with on The Athletic, he said, I never in my heart truly believed that we were going to match it, or that they were going to match it, excuse me. He mentioned that it was over after that phone call. And that says a lot already right there. Right off the bat, he, just based on what the Giants were telling him, he almost saw, you could have said he saw right through it. We're obviously watching Hard Knocks from a third-party view. We're watching it, and we're already getting the feeling, at least I was, by the time this conversation happened, that Joe Schoen and just his entire coaching staff, scouting staff, or whatever that they have there in the meetings, they were very hesitant about it. You know, when you're talking about a player like Saquon at that level, at a Christian McCaffrey type level, at a Justin Jefferson type of level, just based on what they do for your team, the way that you talk about them obviously says a lot. And I'm sure the way that the Vikings try to negotiate a contract this offseason for Justin Jefferson, or even how eventually the Dolphins got something done with Jaylen Waddle, with the Lions signing Amon-Ra St. Brown, and even Jared Goff. If we saw behind the scenes of what they were discussing, how they were talking about it, you could tell that their body language, I'm sure their tone and everything like that would be much different to that of how the Giants were talking. So right away, you could see that this was already on uneven ground, that there was already a lot of doubts coming from the Giants, where, quite honestly, I thought it was going to be the opposite of it, but that's pretty much how it went. And even through the phone, Saquon pretty much felt that it wasn't going to happen up until this point, calling that phone call pretty much the end of it, in all honesty. But he went more in depth about it on just the entire free agent process and how he evaluated that, how it all went down for him with other teams, and how the Giants were involved in it as well. He said, a lot of teams that were about it were really sending true offers and wanted me to come and play for the team. So then that felt good, because it was like, all right, like I feel like the Giants thought I was going to go out there and get 9, maybe 8, stretch it to 10, and then come back to them, and it's all right, well, we got you. If you want to come play at 9, you can play at 9, which I think that's truly what would have got it done. I think that's just where they valued me at, or where Joe valued me at after that. And he said really that the Giants weren't in his top 10, weren't actually in his top 3 teams for making that final decision on where to sign this offseason. So obviously I said a lot there, but the thing that stood out to me, really one of the things that stood out to me, was that right away he said that a lot of teams were about it, that they were sending true offers and wanted me to come play for their team. A complete contrast, just complete opposite of what the Giants were saying in that meeting. I'm sure you guys saw it in one of the early Hard Knocks episodes that they were talking about it. Somebody mentioned, or I think it was Joe Schoen that mentioned that, you know, are we really confident that anybody's going to pay anything more than 9 or something like that? And one scout, or one just member of that team there negotiating it, said that he was kind of rebutting Joe Schoen's thoughts of, yeah, probably there is going to be some teams wanting to go out there, but overall the general sense that you got was that they were overly confident that Saquon as a running back was not going to get more than 10, maybe 9 at the most. And right away Saquon is really disputing that right away, honestly saying that a lot of teams were sending pretty decent offers, and the fact that the Giants weren't even in his top 3 teams to where he decided the final decision would be made, you know, it brings you back to that moment. And I'm sure everybody else thought this, all other Giants fans or anybody else that saw the episode that day, like finding the reason to think that no one is going to pay Saquon this, to be overly confident about it too, is nuts to me. They were so confident that no one was going to do it. And I know Saquon's had injury problems, all the narratives around running backs. Ramondre Stevenson got a new deal, but he is making around $9 or something like that, $9 million per year. But again, the biggest thing with all of this, the biggest thing that I don't understand, well, I do understand the fact that they gave the contract to Daniel Jones, but even so, you can't change what you already, made a decision on, obviously, in the past. But at this moment now, you had to have kind of debated with yourself about this idea that Saquon is not just any typical running back. They mentioned it even in one of the latest episodes of Hard Knocks. John Mara brought it up that Saquon has been their most popular, their best player in a long time. So you combine that all together, the popularity, the work he's put in, and just how much he has really poured into this team. At the end of the day, to come out and believe that nobody else will bid for him, or to even let him hit the market and run that risk, says it all. And Saquon pretty much said it as well, saying that he never felt that this was going to get done with the Giants. He never felt it in his heart that they were going to match any offer that he got, and that was pretty evident right then and there. And for the Giants to end up not matching it to prove Saquon's point was something else, really. To sit there and realize that he wasn't going to be a New York Giant really after that phone call, like he said, and then when the real offers were coming in, he said that it actually he felt a little bit bad and a little bit hurt coming off of that realization that it was truly over with the Giants, because in his mind, he thought he was going to be part of this Giants organization for a long time, getting them back to at least a relevant level of success. But obviously that chapter is now closed, and also the fact that he believed in himself, bet on himself to go out there and get offers and, be surprised almost, it seemed, in that interview with Diana Rossini. He seemed pretty relieved that once the offers came, that his mindset almost switched. You could almost see it in the interview that he got a different expression on his face, where he just had a different mindset at that point on, that you almost like, I don't need the Giants. Like, the Giants don't want to match it. I'm getting these other offers. Like, it stinks that you're not going to be part of this organization going forward. Saquon's probably so grateful to them that they drafted him and everything like that. He has sentimental feelings to it. But the way that they treated him, really, at the end of the day, not offering anything as well, just says a lot. And again, for this to be the guy in New York and in the New York, New Jersey area, if you go anywhere, you could see jerseys, Giants jerseys. The first name you're going to see is Saquon. So now with how all this played out, now getting both sides of the story and getting to see how Saquon felt about it, how he revealed that other teams brought in real offers to where the Giants didn't, this unnecessarily just brings more pressure to the Giants. And in my mind, I see it as a situation now this year with Daniel Jones obviously being almost chosen over Saquon. Again, it's unnecessary pressure that you don't need for a quarterback coming off of an ACL injury. Now getting all this pressure dumped on him almost out of nowhere, because once you get a contract extension, most players, they won't say it, but they almost feel a sense of relaxation. You get a sense of relief, a lot of weight off of your shoulders, like almost like, you got the contract, they believe in me, now let's work towards the future in the next 2 to 3 years. But unfortunately for Daniel Jones, the way that this has rolled out now, he got his extension. Not to say that he's not worthy of getting any of this other blame, but now after that contract extension, a year out, the Giants are already feeling the regret about it, and now they're dumping all this pressure on him right away, where usually players feel that this team has the full support. He has the full support of his team, but that can't be the case right now, because not only is there pressure on Daniel Jones, on this entire team, there's a lot of pressure now on Joe Schoen, on Brian Daboll, on trying to keep their jobs. Unfortunately, for the downside of having Hard Knocks follow you all around, if you have moments like this, it's going to come back to bite you. And I think now that now that fans have seen the behind the scenes of everything and have really gotten a sense of how these conversations have gone down, I think the bar has been raised a little bit more. The standard of where you'd want to see the Giants now this year is going to be raised a little bit more, whereas maybe you could have gone by with a 500, close to that record, one-score games decide your record, sort of something like that. Maybe that would have been all right, but now I feel like that dial has moved up a little bit more, and that the Giants are going to have to exceed overly exceed some expectations for everyone to kind of sweep this under the rug now, because they let their prize golden player move on, not only move on, but to join the Eagles. And now if Daniel Jones, the player that they decided to give this money to, doesn't at least play all right, everyone's going to point the finger probably at Daniel Jones, but also at Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. And then at that point, I feel like their owner John Mara, is going to have, or feel like he's going to have no choice but to do something about it, because this has been overly, it's just been a trend that's overly gone on for the New York Giants. They haven't been up until that level for a long time now. It's crazy because there's not been a repeat champion in the NFC East, and I don't remember the last time the Giants were really in that competition. And it's unfortunate because they have good players. I like that they drafted Malik Neighbors. They have Richie James there as well. Jalen Hyatt is somebody that I think they could, tap into his full potential as well. And their defensive line also is just very good on how they built it up. But this is now an offensive league. It's all built up on the pass and how your quarterback truly plays. And if Daniel Jones doesn't live up to that, everybody is going to get a piece of just the blame. And unfortunately, the biggest, receivers of the blame could end up being Joe Schoen, and that could cost them their jobs. But that is what comes with this, seeing the behind the scenes, getting everybody to talk about it now. Just raise the bar a little bit more for me, and we'll see how it goes. The Giants, in a tough NFC East in general, we'll see if they could squeeze out a couple games here to kind of save their jobs for Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen. But that'll be that for that topic. We're going to move on with the rest of the show. Sticking in the NFC, talking about another team with potential, or more potential, I should say, the Chicago Bears, on the complete opposite side of the spectrum that the New York Giants are on. We listened to some comments made by Jaylon Johnson, their star defensive back, on how the Bears could finally turn that production into something that is worth playing for in 2024. There's been a lot of hype around this team. He wants to see production in 2024. We're going to get to what he said in just a few seconds. We'll be right back after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Back here on the show to talk some more about another NFC team that is looking into 2024 to look a lot better than they did in 2023, because they have a lot of reason to do so, talking about the Chicago Bears and how they can turn all this potential, all of this hype, into more production in 2024. Really, right now, if you followed the development, the rebuild of the Chicago Bears team and their entire roster, I think we're at almost as close as we can get to the peak of this team than we've ever seen at any point previously in this rebuild, because you see now that they have brought in guys just this offseason like Caleb Williams, obviously, DeAndre Swift, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, just all of those players this offseason, which is tremendous for this team at this point. But also, just off of last year, they had guys that stepped up for them, or that they were added to this team as well, in Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, Darnell Wright, DJ Moore, all having tremendous seasons and contributing a lot to the Chicago Bears team. And that was just last offseason or the one previous to that. They are really building this up pretty quickly, honestly. And that is a lot of credit going to their general manager, Ryan Poles, and how he made a lot of tough decisions, a lot of questionable ones at the time. But now I think it all has been paying off and leading up until this point where there is a lot of hype around this team. And I mentioned that hype because some of the betting markets also are showing a lot of belief in the Chicago Bears because their over-under for 2024 in wins is set at 9.5 right now. And this is the first time that they've been expected to be a winning team since 2018. And that's pretty remarkable, I would say, for this Bears team because there's been a lot of losing seasons in the last few years, and really they've shown some glimpses of it last year, the second half of the year after they traded for Montez Sweat. You could really see what this team could truly be with that potential again if they bunkered down and showed it all at one time. But now they finally got that piece that they were missing in Caleb Williams, their franchise quarterback, and it seems like you're almost running out of excuses now of to where to look on where this team could fail. Obviously, the biggest one is the inexperience of it all and getting all of them to play together and as a unit. But if you're just looking at it based on talent and on paper, it's hard to point out something that is really missing from this team other than maybe the offensive line or something like that. They have really done a great job of doing that. But like I said on that point, on getting everything to mix together and culminate into something productive, Jaylon Johnson, who after 4 years of being on the Chicago Bears, not only got his extension this offseason, but he's been here long enough to see how this team went from very poor, very lackluster to now where they are right now. And he just wants to see results finally from this talented group. And it got him to say, I feel like I've been on some talented rosters to where we've had a lot of upside. I feel like for me, it's one of those things where I'm tired of just having upside and having potential. I want to be in a position where we actually go out there and we are that and not just what we're projected to be at. And he makes a good point, Jaylon Johnson there, speaking pretty clearly of what he wants to do and what his goals are for 2024 because, again, like over the last 4 years in the NFL with the Chicago Bears, Jaylon Johnson has seen an 8-8 record, a 6-11 record, a 3-14 record, and just last year a 7-10 record, and the best year obviously being that 8-8 season where they finished second in the NFC North and they lost in the first round of the playoffs. And then since then, it's been 3 consecutive losing seasons for the Bears, and it hasn't looked good at all for them. But now, this isn't Jaylon Johnson. He mentioned it in the rest of that interview, saying that this isn't a, proclamation from Johnson saying that this is our year by any means. He's not at that level yet. Obviously, that's unrealistic for the Chicago Bears team that still is pretty young in this process, but it is hard to point out a weakness, like I said before, and he's keeping the expectations realistic, honestly, now, because not only are they getting better, but you have to look at the entire NFC and how difficult it is just for them to be a winning team. For them to get over 9.5 wins, that's pretty high for a team, again, that is just finally got that missing piece and the most important piece to the puzzle finally added to their team. For betting markets and betting, apps to set their over-under for wins at 9.5, I think is saying a lot. And not to put any conspiracy theories out there, but again, if they're setting it that high, maybe there's something there that you can look into the Bears, and maybe they have a chance. Maybe they come close. They won 7 games last year, and this year I don't think they have that tough of a schedule either. So I don't know. Maybe they come close. Maybe I'm being a little bit too delusional talking about the Bears. But overall, this defense really showed face for this team last year, at the end of last year, and it became their identity. But now, heading into 2024, I mentioned they finally got Caleb Williams in there. And now you can ask the question, I believe, of what is more crucial for this team to have happen in 2024 to get those results that Jaylon Johnson wants to see. Is it more crucial for them to have their defense or their offense play at a high level for them to reach the playoffs? And I think it is a close one to call, but overall, I would say that this offense really needs to be more important to this team or needs to perform better than the defense in order for them to reach the playoffs, in my opinion. I just talked a lot about their defense, talking about how impressive they were last year after adding Montez Sweat and having playmakers at each level of that team on defense, but it just goes back to that idea of, this new modernized NFL in this day and age with having a great offense, to me, is really the bare minimum that a true contender needs to have, or at least just a playoff team needs to have. You need to show a consistent level of decent offense, or at least putting up close to 20 points at the absolute minimum. You need a decent offense to do that. You need to be putting up at least 20 points, and then once you get to a good defense, I think that could be the separator or the difference maker later on in the playoffs, if that makes sense. The offense will get you there. The offense, if it's consistent enough, will elevate you to that next level of being considered a true contender to your division, to your conference, and maybe even the Super Bowl. We're not saying the Bears are going to make it there, but that's sort of the progression that needs to happen, and I believe that the offense is more important for that reason, just because they need to be more consistent than the Bears' defense needs to be, in my opinion. Like I said, a great defense will usually, if you're overly dependent on them to perform at a top 5, top 3 level, it's just unrealistic, and eventually you see in a lot of these teams that make the playoffs or are considered good teams that their defense really just loses its legs later in the season or just late in the game, honestly. If they're constantly out there, if they're on the field more times than the offense, it doesn't do any team any good, and you can't just win that way. You can't expect the defense to go out there every 2 minutes, every 3 minutes, and expect them to not falter at some point without a break. You look at just this last playoffs, the Browns, the Steelers, the 49ers, and the Ravens. Each of them, in each of the games that they got eliminated, you saw a lot of tiredness in that defense. Talking about the Browns against the Texans, their defense was out there a lot more. Joe Flacco was turning the ball over. They were getting stifled on offense, and that led to the Texans running away with it and just destroying them there towards the end. Then with the Steelers as well, great defense, kind of kept it close at some points in that game against the Bills, but again, their defense, if their offense isn't putting up points with Mason Rudolph, the Bills end up running away with it like they did at home. The Baltimore Ravens, same thing. They kept them in the game the entire time, but the moments that their offenses needed to step up and score points, they didn't do so, so they lost the game to the Chiefs. And the 49ers as well in the Super Bowl, great defensive performance in the first half, stifling any offense that the Chiefs could get going, but then really not to their fault, but overall it serves the same purpose. Their defense starts to fall apart a little bit, starts to loosen up in the second half. You see the offense not really giving them a break, or cutting them a break, I should say, with going, I think, 3 straight drives, going 3 and out. That leads to the Chiefs getting some momentum, and now they're in a rhythm now, and it cost them the game, obviously, there towards the end. So all those scenarios kind of play into what I'm trying to say. It is a lot of pressure on a rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams. You do acknowledge that fact, but that's why they invested so much in this offense. That's why they brought in Keenan, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift, and their offensive line is also getting better. It has gone better over the last few years. It's not going to be a smooth process whatsoever, but you'd hope that it makes the just period of getting over the hump, turning that corner, you hope that it makes it a little smoother and a little bit quicker when you support them with so many talented players around them. But again, by any means is that going to be easy. There's going to be some bad moments this year with Caleb. There's going to be a lot of great moments, I believe. But you're going to have to take the good with the bad at this point and accept the pressure, because this team is very close, I believe, to getting in a spot where they could at least compete for that 7th spot in the playoffs. But again, going back to the defensive side of things, you need that offense to get to that point, because if you look around just their division and in the conference, you have the Lions, great offense, the Packers, another great offense as well. Even the Minnesota Vikings, too. There might be some questions at quarterback, but their supporting cast is very good. And then outside of just their division, you look at the Rams. The Falcons got a lot better on offense. The Eagles look like an absolute juggernaut. The 49ers are obviously still there. All of them have great offenses to still go with their defense. And at the end of the day, those defenses will create a difference as well. I'm just thinking about it now in that game against with the Lions and the 49ers. The 49ers stunk up the joint at home. Then in the second half, the Detroit Lions offense stifled a little bit, couldn't get anything going. The 49ers defense, kind of stood tall, and that cost the Lions the game there at the end of the day. So over and over, I'm showing these examples of offenses needing to stay consistent, or else it can quickly turn on you and just flip the game on its head if you have 3 straight drives of just punting, turning the ball over on downs. That could catch up to you, especially when you're playing a good team. That's why I believe the Bears need their offense right now at this point more than their defense, because you have confidence in their defense already. You've shown that they're able to get some stops consistently last year at the end of it. But now you need the offense to kind of step up and match them in terms of production to get what you'd expect to get out of this year, which is improvement. That's the biggest thing, seeing the improvement, competing in these games. That's the overarching goal for me, but we'll see where the offense goes, and we'll see how slow or how quickly this offense gets into a rhythm in 2024. But Jaylon Johnson wants to see it. He's pretty confident that it could happen this year, so we'll take his word for it. I think they could get it done, but that'll be that for the first half of the show. We're going to head to a quick break right now, and on the other side, the second half of the show, I have a scenario that I wanted to throw at you guys. Would it be more likely that the 49ers pay Brandon Aiyuk and then subsequently trade Deebo Samuel, or is it more likely that they trade Brandon Aiyuk, end up trading him for, say, Davante Adams, and bringing Davante Adams over to the Bay to join Deebo Samuel? I'm going to get more into that, where that's coming from me, when we return from the break. We'll be right back after this.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to jump into a hypothetical scenario, jumping into my mind a little bit on how some of these situations just pop into my mind, and I start thinking about them, and it seems to be more logical the more and more I think about it. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this scenario that popped into my head, not just randomly, but after some reports that I saw from Jeremy Fowler over this past weekend that the 49ers obviously didn't want to draft or trade Brandon Aiyuk or even pay him. So it seems like it's going to stall at least, or they're not finding any common ground in their negotiations. Aiyuk is obviously still signed through this year, plus they have the option to tag him after this year. So not too much leverage there for Brandon Aiyuk, but nevertheless, it's not going to stop teams from inquiring about a trade for Brandon Aiyuk, especially after he requested a trade. Then, to go along with that, those rumors about trading Aiyuk and whatnot, you have Davante Adams, who last week really dominated the headlines with all the rumors linking him to the New York Jets, playing with Aaron Rodgers again, Breece Hall talking about it, Garrett Wilson talking about it. You had all those rumors to where both of these scenarios, in terms of trades that could happen right now, are neck and neck for the biggest piece of news that it could be if one of these gets done. But from that point, from those reports, it followed it up by me watching some of Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio, and he brought up the idea of first trading Deebo Samuel and then paying Brandon Aiyuk what he wants as one of the solutions to this stallment that we have between Brandon and the 49ers. If they don't really want to lose Brandon, that could be a viable option, just because Deebo is heading into that final year of a 3-year deal that he signed in 2022. So 2024 will be that last year, 2024, 2025 will be the last year for Deebo, so they could come to a point where you could trade him. That could be something that the 49ers could be interested in if they absolutely don't want to lose Brandon at the end of the day. It's interesting to see how the 49ers will value each receiver at that point, but after that, I saw another scenario where there's going to be a high asking price for one, Davante Adams, because the Raiders don't really need to trade him at all. But also, there's going to be a high asking price for Brandon Aiyuk, obviously. We've talked about it, how some teams reached out to the 49ers already, but some executives came away with believing that the 49ers just want too much. So, you put one scenario with the other, and why not just trade Brandon for Davante Adams is what I saw in this article that I was reading. And at that point, you'd obviously keep Deebo Samuel to team up with Davante Adams. And I got to thinking with both of these scenarios that I saw, it's not too far out of the realm of insanity, you could say. You know, there's a lot of reasons that either one of these could happen, and I wanted to bring it up to you guys just to get your guys' thoughts on which one is more likely, which one do you guys believe could end up happening, or maybe none of these could end up happening. But starting off with the first scenario, keeping Brandon Aiyuk, paying him $30 million, $31 million per year, and subsequently trading Deebo Samuel just because you can't have both of them up there, obviously. There are some reasons to go about it. You know, you look at the situation, Brandon Aiyuk might be seen as the wide receiver with higher potential, maybe as a pure wide receiver, beating opposing defensive backs, getting open all the time, great hands, everything you'd want in a wide receiver. Some, I believe, think that Brandon Aiyuk could have a higher ceiling than Deebo in that aspect. And also, you look at Deebo Samuel and what he brings to this team. Obviously, that 1 year where he went completely berserk and he had the passing game, the running game, and it threw everybody off. And everybody looked at Deebo like just this perfect weapon to have all over the field and a nightmare for opposing defenses to kind of deal with. But that running aspect kind of hasn't been there for at least this past year, because in 2023, you look at both of them side by side. Brandon Aiyuk had more targets, more receptions, and more yards, receiving yards, than Deebo Samuel. So, okay, you can expect that. You can say that because Deebo is running the ball at times, lining up in the backfield, he might not get those numbers that Brandon gets. But with that being the case, Deebo Samuel only had 37 carries this year for 225 rushing yards. So, not really producing too much from the running game. And that, of course, comes with Christian McCaffrey being back there. You're not going to take carries away from Christian and give them to Deebo, who wasn't a running back ever to start off with. So you can kind of understand that point, but the reason Deebo got paid is because he brought that aspect to it. But now that you brought in Christian, he doesn't contribute that much to that aspect. So if you look at the receiving numbers, Brandon kind of hasn't beat in that area. So that could be another reason people might be open to this idea. But also, talking about just the receiving aspect of it, again, Deebo hasn't exceeded 1,000 yards in the last 3 years. He hasn't done it since 2021. There's also some injury concerns with Deebo. You saw he was banged up a lot this year in the game against the Browns with that scapula injury. Then it popped up again, and then it popped up once again in the Super Bowl. In some of these crucial moments where you need your best players to be there, Deebo, not to say that he's injury prone or anything, but compared to Brandon, I think there has been a little bit more concern there with Deebo and staying healthy. You also think about the chemistry aspect with Brock Purdy. It looks like he has a great connection with Brandon. You don't want to lose him for that reason, to continuing to develop with Brock Purdy. So that could be another reason, another incentive to do that. They also drafted Ricky Pearsall, and you can make the case that he could replace Brandon or he could replace Deebo, but I believe that they drafted him for a reason. You don't just draft a receiver at the end of the first round if you don't have any plan or anything to have him incorporated in your offensive scheme. So right now he couldn't fit in there if they kept all their stars. So drafting him kind of gives me the sense that they want to believe, or that they did draft him just in case one of these guys were to go. And also, Brandon Aiyuk has been pretty much screaming to get the workload that a true number one receiver gets, to really amplify his numbers and show everybody what he could be on this team. And he hasn't gotten that opportunity, obviously, with the excess of riches that the 49ers have. So maybe if you trade Deebo at this point, Brandon could not only get the workload that he wants, but just reach a different level with more targets, proving that he can be a true elite number one receiver. And that could benefit the 49ers also at the end of the day. So that's this scenario. Those are all the points for maybe deciding to go with this one as the more likely option. But there is also the flip side of this, and trading Brandon Aiyuk for Davante Adams. Two teams I know that don't have to trade these players. Why would you want to get this done? But it stems from the fact that Brandon asking for a trade request doesn't make me feel that the 49ers want to pay him at this point. So why not get somebody at this level that not only meets the 49ers' high asking price, but likewise for the Raiders meets their asking price as well for Davante Adams. Las Vegas could afford, Las Vegas could afford Brandon Aiyuk's asking price right now. They don't have a lot of high contracts on their roster as it stands. Davante's probably the highest earning one, other than Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins. Now that I'm thinking about it, those two are the highest ones. So if Brandon comes in and he's asking for around 30, I believe that they could fit him into that. And the other way around, Davante could fit what the 49ers were trying to offer Brandon Aiyuk, around $27, $28 million. That's around what Davante Adams is making right now. So financially, if they just switch teams, it looks like both teams could afford it if it were to happen. Then you have the personal side of it, the connection at Arizona State University. And Antonio Pierce, who was the head coach of the Raiders, was there during the time that Brandon was there. So they already have a connection similarly to Brandon and Jaden Daniels. Then at the age of 26, also for Brandon Aiyuk, he gets that massive extension, and his career timeline lines up more to what the Raiders are trying to do with their rebuild right now than I think it does for Davante, because Davante is on the other side of 30. His time at this elite level is coming closer to an end than that of Brandon Aiyuk, obviously, and I think the Raiders need a few extra years, and it doesn't line up too much with Davante. Whereas if he was on the 49ers right now and this trade did happen, it lines up perfectly with them, in my opinion, because you get a win-now team trying to finally get that Super Bowl that they've been in the game over and over and over again, and you get Davante Adams, who has not even been to a Super Bowl, but is at his peak in terms of ability and level that he brings as a wide receiver. Putting him on this roster for the 49ers, you don't really lose too much, and you bring in a guy that not only is from this area. It might be a little bit weird because he grew up as a Raiders fan in Oakland, but still close enough to consider it a hometown player. And you get great compensation for Aiyuk, a number one receiver, for elite number one receiver. And likewise for Brandon Aiyuk, he gets the workload that he so desperately wants with the Raiders as well, with Jacoby Myers there, Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer as well. You get the workload either way if you trade for Davante Adams or if you trade Deebo. So that kind of goes hand in hand with both scenarios. But where I stand on this, if any of these were to happen, what I would love to see happen would be that Davante Adams gets traded for Brandon Aiyuk, if I had to choose, because I believe that gets the best results for everybody. I believe that Davante fits this team, is in a win-now mode with the 49ers. He needs to get to a Super Bowl, at least play in one. And then if he wins one, that's awesome. But the 49ers, their Super Bowl window right now, it's not closing, but how many times are you going to make it to the Super Bowl? It stinks that you've met the Chiefs each time, but you got to get to the point where you get over the hump, you finally slay your dragon. And Davante adding himself to this team, trading for them, doesn't hurt their chances. If anything, you could argue that it elevates them if you take Davante Adams over Brandon Aiyuk in terms of receivers. So that is something that I would love to see happen if I had to choose. That's the way I would go. And lastly, if Deebo does get traded and the other scenario does end up happening, San Francisco would probably, you could say, would get worse just because of the uncertainty that you'd have there with losing Deebo. Of course, you don't know who you're going to get back, but unlikely that it is a player up to his standards. If you do lose Deebo, that uncertainty you have with the readiness of a Ricky Pearsall or of Juwan Jennings stepping into a bigger role, there's a lot of uncertainty there, so you don't really know what you're going to get out of that, and I don't think it's any question that you're going to get worse if you trade away Deebo, but that is where I stand on it. Weird scenario, just out of left field, it might seem like, but I thought it was interesting on seeing Mike Florio comment about it, seeing another article bringing up this scenario, so there is a lot of good reasons why this could happen if it were to end up happening. I'd love to know what you guys would prefer, seeing Davante traded for Brandon Aiyuk or seeing Deebo traded away from the 49ers and the 49ers just paying Brandon Aiyuk what he's asking for. Leave your guys' thoughts in the chat box or in the comment section after the show. But that'll be that for that segment. We have one more to get to on this show. The NFL Network's top 100 player rankings have come out on Monday. The initial 100 to 81 players have been revealed. I wanted to react to it because there were some surprises and just some interesting rankings on there. So I wanted to just update you guys on that and give my thoughts on it as well. After the break, we're going to get to that. So we'll be right back in just a few seconds. Thank you for joining me on the last segment of today's show to talk about one of my favorite segments, one of my favorite traditions, you could say, I guess, from the NFL is this annual top 100 player rankings that come out each offseason. The NFL Network does this annually, like I said, over the previous seasons, and this year's rendition of the top 100 started on Monday, on July 22nd, and every weekday since then will receive 10 more players that they reveal each weekday as it counts down to August 1st or August 2nd. I got a lot of conflicting reports on when the final day will be, but August 1st or 2nd will be the final day of this, and it'll be where the top 10 will be released. And I think this player rankings is my favorite just because it is done by the players. You always see the videos come out on what they say about who's ranked where and why they're ranked where, and it is pretty entertaining, but also you get a good feeling. I think this one's the most accurate one on just how your peers evaluate you, how the players that play your position, how the players that battle against you really value you among 100 NFL players, and that's not even enough for really all the great players that you see. A lot of them were probably left off of this list, but when I wanted to react to this, I made this segment when the top 100 to 81 were released. So I know since then, I think they're up to 61 now after today. So I'm sure I'll react to some more of it. But to get through the top 100 to 81, I'm not going to go through every pick, but just some takeaways I had for where some of these guys landed on the rankings. Starting off with 100, the last ranked player on the top 100, Zaire Franklin. I wanted to bring him up just because he made the list for his first time. After a career year, it earned him the number 100 spot. He had 179 combined tackles, which was a career best, 107 solo tackles, which both of those numbers were only second in the NFL to, I believe, Bobby Wagner. So a rising star there for the Indianapolis Colts, their middle linebacker there in Zaire Franklin. good for him to make the list at such a young age after breaking onto the scene in 2023. Then you move on a little bit further to Terry McLaurin at number 97. It seems like he always makes the list, but even though he's had 10 different starting quarterbacks since he entered the league in 2019, which is crazy. The consistency that this guy has, if he had a top-tier, top-talented quarterback, you can only imagine where he could go. And it's unfortunate that it's been 6 to 5 seasons now that we could finally see it, but hopefully we finally see that true potential now that Jaden Daniels is there. But seeing him on the list, not really surprising, but at number 97, I think context should matter a little bit. Maybe he could be a little bit higher, but that's just me. Davante Smith also made the list again after last year. He was number 100 on this list, but now he jumps up 10 spots to number 90, and it still honestly feels pretty low for Davante Smith. Again, not his fault that he's surrounded by the A.J. Browns, by the Dallas Goddards, the Jalen Hurtses, now Saquon Barkley as well. But just talent overall, how Davante Smith has come in pretty much as pro-ready as any receiver we've seen over the last few years. It feels like he could be a little bit higher, 70s, maybe 60s for me, but he ranks in at number 90 this year. Talking about players ranked low, Saquon at 86, dropping 55 spots, is pretty crazy, pretty disrespectful to me. I know there's always the injuries, there's always just being on the Giants and the team performance playing into it doesn't help at all, but this is a generational type of running back. Still, for how much he gives to the Giants at this point and how much he was their entire team, 86 is a little bit too low for me. Like, dropping 55 spots, you could drop 30 maybe, but 86 for Saquon I think was way too low. I didn't really like that one. A surprise that I saw on the list, number 82, Montez Sweat. After a career year, was a pleasant surprise for me to see him on this list because we've talked a lot about the Chicago Bears defense. We just finished talking about him on today's show and how much he really changed the trajectory of this Bears team to be decent, to be all right, to be at a different level, almost pushing that elite level, I think says a lot. I like that he's on the list. I like that he got credit for it. I honestly didn't think he was going to, but to see him on here, to get him on the first top 100 player rankings for him in his career, and also earning a Pro Bowl on top of that, I think it's well deserved, and I liked seeing Montez Sweat on the list. Then, the two I wanted to talk about almost in the same breath is Aaron Rodgers coming in at 92 and Kirk Cousins coming in at 81. Why am I talking about them together? Well, a lot of people who saw the list come out initially had some issues with both of them being on the list because you look at both of them, they both made the list with missing a lot of time. Aaron got hurt in the first game, so to still be included in this list, comparing him to someone like Saquon, of course they take in the career and what this player means, but in that same breath, if you're taking, the history part of Aaron Rodgers on who he is, legacy-wise, and you still give him 92, you could arguably do the same thing with Saquon. Not as accomplished, but talent-wise in his career on what we've seen. If you're going to rank Saquon, or if you're not going to rank Saquon a little bit higher, rank him so low just based on who he is legacy-wise, Aaron, a lot of people argue that he shouldn't be on the list. Now, if he did play, probably played at a great level, a decent level that we're used to seeing out of Aaron, but that didn't happen, so just based on what we saw, maybe Aaron shouldn't have made the list, but he comes in at 92, so that's one thing. And then Kirk Cousins, same thing. To be rated higher, that much higher than Aaron Rodgers, he was on pace to have a historic season, but again, he missed a lot of time. I think it was week 5 or 6 that he got hurt, or somewhere around there. And from that point on, the Vikings, just fell apart after that. So for Kirk to be 81 in front of Saquon, even Aaron Rodgers, arguably even Montez Sweat, little questionable, but he did come in at the highest ranking of the range of players that I wanted to talk about, but he wasn't the biggest one I wanted to mention. We're going to close out this show again with me talking about Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence came in at number 94. He was ranked the number 94th ranked player out of the top 100 best players in the NFL. He was number 96 last year, and after a poor year, to his standards, to a number one pick standards, in terms of passing yards, he was 10th in the NFL. In passing touchdowns, he was tied for 15th. Sam Howell also got 21 passing touchdowns, so he was right there with Sam Howell. Not to say that he isn't that much better than Sam Howell. Obviously, everyone's going to take Trevor Lawrence over Sam Howell, but production-wise, passing touchdowns were right there with Sam, and he was 4th in the NFL in terms of interceptions thrown by quarterbacks. So some probably thought that he could have been left off of this list. I saw some reactions that, based on the year that he had, that he could have been left off of this list, but that's one thing. I don't go that far. I wouldn't say that he shouldn't be in the top 100 players, but this is the highest paid quarterback, and his peers are ranking him where he did in the 90s. Out of the top 100 players ranked in the NFL, he's in the 90s, and it's not like, he missed like a ton of games. He probably missed the latter half of 5 or 4 games, even that, so that really doesn't serve too much of an excuse. They dealt with injuries in general last year to kind of fall apart there towards the end, but he was pretty much there the entire season, and it seems like the biggest gripe from most people, and I'll throw myself in there, that so far through Trevor Lawrence's career, it's always been about almost giving him the benefit of the doubt because he was this generational quarterback coming out of the draft. He was sensational at Clemson for such a young player to come in, then drafted number 1 overall. Not the ideal situation to come into with Urban Meyer, but since then, Doug Peterson has been there. They've looked good, but still you want to see more out of Trevor Lawrence, and for him to be ranked at 94, highest paid quarterback in the NFL, ranked that low, I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Burrow missed more games, I believe, than Trevor Lawrence, and no way is he going to be ranked lower than 40-something. And Trevor was also there. Both of them highest paid in the NFL, but one of them is almost double the amount of spots behind the other one. And I don't think, again, that should be the case. I don't want to regurgitate the point about Trevor deserving the money. Great for him that he got his money. The Jaguars obviously think that he deserves this money, but I think there is something there with trying to justify this contract and based on production and future projections in terms of quarterbacks, and then you look at where his peers, the players that go against him, rank him right now, very different in terms of where that money is going and where everybody else sees him in terms of ability compared to other quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers was ranked higher than him, and he didn't play at all last year, so that was my biggest thing. That was my biggest point of emphasis from this list because of all the reasons that I mentioned, but you guys should go check out the list. It's pretty interesting when the videos come out and things like that, but leave your guys' thoughts on the list, on my thoughts on Trevor, and where some of these players fell in the NFL Top 100. But that'll do it for today's show. We're going to wrap up on that. I want to thank you guys again for joining me on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. To catch more of this show, check out both YouTube channels, the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel for different forms of content around the NFL as well. And as a final reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL content, more storylines as they come out around the league. With me, your host, Manny Maradiaga, thanking you for joining once again, and I hope to see you guys back here with me again tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn it.